So we have a full board.
Okay. This is Robert Bowker. I'm standing in for Chair Michael Beldotti, who is on vacation now. So as chair, it's the August 25th Planning Board meeting. So let's jump right into it and kick it off with follow-up of PV 06-2020, 20 Main Street.
All right. So and just bringing them in right now. So we have Frank Filicciotto, we have Stacy Belmont and Dylan Hardman, and JB Hernandez is the architect, and we have Skip Francis. Okay. And let me just pull up the agenda and pull up the screen for the agenda so we can kind of have that going, and then be ready to go. Okay, so so we have everything here now. Everybody's up. I guess the floor is the applicants.
Great. Thank you, Jaime. Good evening, acting chair and board members. Frank Filicciotto with Creighton Manning. Just to kind of refresh everyone's memories on this particular site, we were last before the board on July 28th. At that time, we presented the site plan, which proposes an exterior propane tank in the parking lot at Main Street to serve a coffee/bar use. At that time, we had identified a parking variance that required a zoning board of appeals hearing and decision. We appeared in front of the zoning board of appeals on August 11th and obtained a favorable decision with respect to the variance. So as you see on the plan now, we're proposing a total of
real quick, I apologize, Frank. I just want to know for the record, David Chow is here now.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jaime. So just for everyone's knowledge, we have 3 exterior parking spaces. The 4th parking space, all of which are existing, will be used for a temporary propane tank that will be used for the coffee and bar use until an agreement with Con Ed can be worked out for a more permanent means of gas. So at this point, we're before you having gotten the ZBA decision. We'd like, obviously, to hear any additional feedback. There were some comments coming out of that ZBA hearing with respect to how we were going to screen the propane tank, and we've provided some additional information to the board, sort of a mood board, so to speak, in terms of ways in which we can address that screening, so to speak. So at this point, I think, without further ado, I think the board understands the application. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I have my colleague Skip Francis is on the video as well, and he can answer any technical questions that you have.
I have a question, and looking at this, so to the far left of the schematic with the diagonal lines, that's the sidewalk?
That's actually
adjacent building.
Oh, that's the adjacent building. Okay, so that the living wall, if you will, the green wall is on the right-hand side. Then the building is screening on the left-hand side, and the bike rack would be facing the parking lot. Is that correct?
Skip, if you're on, could you clarify that?
May I point to this image? Is it possible that I have a share screen?
You should be able to annotate at the top, view options, and then pull down there.
Okay. I think this would be the area for the bike rack out in front of this wall.
I'm not, oh, there it is. Oh, okay. That's the bike rack. Okay.
Yep. That's the area for the bike rack. The wall itself is along here on the left. The living wall, excuse me, where they'll have some green
right
attached to the bollards. But as you were saying, this was the hatch is the adjacent building.
Right, and just how high are the bollards? I'm sorry. How tall are they?
Probably 4 feet tall.
Okay. So not as tall as the tank. They're not as.
If I'm not mistaken, they won't be visible. They'll be behind the living wall, correct?
The living wall itself is proposed to be 6 feet tall. They'll be behind the wall, much shorter than 6 feet, probably around 42 or 48 inches tall.
Right,
3.5 to 4 feet tall.
Isn't one of the bollards though facing the concrete sidewalk in the south direction? I guess that is.
There are 3 bollards facing the sidewalk. 1, 2, 3.
So those will be visible though.
No, the wall will be also on front of that bollard set
okay.
as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's the wall will be an L shape.
I got it.
So the bollards will not be seen
Got
in
it.
either direction. Hope that helps.
Okay. That works for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me to share.
How is the living wall attached to the bollards? Is it like a hooks on top and it's over the bollard? Or is it fastened in? Is it drilled in? Like how you fasten into it?
It can be either banded or have U-bolts around the bollard that fasten to it. It's not going to be drilled into the bollard or anything like that.
Yeah, I would note that while the applicant is proposing to provide a living wall, it still needs to ultimately go in front of the building department. So the building inspector would have to determine whatever they use has to be consistent with what the code allows.
Okay.
What were the ZBA concerns? You said they were concerns about screening or?
What I was referring to was using the green wall to screen the propane tank itself. So the green wall was a solution that was born out of that discussion with the ZBA.
Okay.
Screening the propane tank.
This is Seth Roy. I just have 2 questions. Number 1, I'm assuming there are no lot line windows on the adjacent building that would also have a view into the tank. And then also, I guess in the green wall proposals, and again, I know it has to go through the building department, some of them have a planter in front of them. Some of them have plants that are growing directly on it. I'm assuming you're looking maybe more at a planter type situation, or is that just not decided yet?
I'll address your first question. On the wall, immediately, I guess we'd say the west face of that adjacent building, there are no windows that would overlook the propane tank. I can show you a screenshot if I can share my screen of what that, oh, there we go, perfect. Yep. So there are windows on that face, on that building face, but they're not in the vicinity of the propane tank.
And the second question about the wall itself, there are currently no like concrete planters proposed. The plantings will be hanging within the wall or worked into the wall.
Okay.
I'm good with it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's going to look good. And it's hopefully going to be temporary, right? Once Con Ed lifts the moratorium, this is going to be taken out and the parking is going to be brought back. Right? That's the full intent of that?
That's the plan, yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, any other questions or concerns? I mean, I'm good with it. Anybody else?
Good with it.
I'm good with it.
Me too, I'm fine.
So Jaime, I guess we can make a motion to approve and then just
Might have to just double check that there's anyone here to speak to it, but I don't.
anyone from the public here to speak on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there are. So there are certainly a bunch of people here. Let me check to see if any of them would like to speak.
You also
This is a site plan and it's a conditional use, so you'll need to do two separate motions.
Yeah. If there is anybody who is here to speak on this, if they could raise their hand. Otherwise, the assumption is that you are here for the other projects, the other items. You just check my email, make sure I didn't get any emails. Oh, also, normally at the beginning of the meeting, we do tell people that if they have any questions, they can email me and I will read them off. So just in case, my email is jmartinez@villageofossining.org. That's also in the agenda as well. And I have no email, so.
Okay. So I would suggest taking a motion on the conditional use permit first, if you're ready to do that.
This is Jeff. I'll make the motion.
Seth, I'll second.
Do you want to do a roll call?
Yeah, let's do a roll call on it. Yeah.
Okay. Jeff Gasparo,
Aye.
Seth Roy,
Aye.
Alberto Fernandez,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
David Chow,
Aye.
and Eric Talbot. Voting in place of Mike Beldotti.
Eric, you may be muted.
Yeah. You're still muted.
Still muted. Well, not
You're
muted.
unmuted, but you're not making any noise. It's like your speaker's not working.
Yeah.
Still not working.
Nod profusely.
Does a thumbs up work?
Thumbs up. Note for the record that Eric Talbot is motioning with a thumbs up to say that he approves the resolution.
Okay, so that is 7 in favor and none not in favor of the conditional use permit. So let's take a motion then on the site plan permit.
Michael Aronson, motion to approve the site plan permit.
This is Jeff. I'll second.
And so roll call, Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Jeff Gasparo,
Aye.
Alberto Fernandez, Alberto,
Aye.
Seth Roy,
Aye.
David Chow, Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
and Eric Talbot.
Aye.
Oh, yay. So that's 7 in favor, none against.
Great. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your attention to this and we look forward to getting open.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good evening.
26 Pinkwood was a late scratch, right? So we're going to jump right to business on the board.
They're adjourned, right, Jaime?
Yeah, 26 Camp Woods is adjourned. They are in front of the zoning board right now. So we're waiting on a decision from the zoning board and expect that if they do get their variances, that they'll be back next month.
Right.
All right, so we have Lou Damazzi.
1 Ramapo Road, BAR.
Yeah, from 1 Ramapo Road.
Okay, I'm here. Can everyone hear me? Good.
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. So the application before you today is for an addition. I'm going to share a screen. No. Amy, can I share the screen?
Yeah, go right ahead. My name is Jaime, by the way.
Jaime, sorry about that. All right. So here is the house. It's located on the corner of Ramapo and 133. The house is located here. There's an existing garage that's just 1 story flat roof that we'd like to add the addition to. Here's a front of the photograph looking from Ramapo. This is the location where the addition would, we're proposing the addition. So here's the front elevation. There's the side. This is, again, that flat roof here. This is where that addition would like to go. Rear elevation, the addition's going to go here. And this is the other side. Has nothing to do with it, but I thought I included all, would be nice to include all the sides. So again, site plan, this is where the addition is going to be located. And then this is the addition itself here. It's a 1-story addition for a family room, just to expand a little bit of the house to make it a little bit more cozy for the family. And what we're proposing basically is just a family room, an existing living room here with where the 2 windows are. We're going to walk through that area into this family room, and then French doors that will lead out to the backyard, just making it a little bit easier also to get to the backyard. This is the real elevation showing those doors and the windows on either side. I worked with the homeowners to, you know, they really wanted a lot of light, so we made sure that we had a lot of windows for this project here. So this side facing 133, really not visible from any neighbor. They would like a lot of light, so this is where we put a lot of the windows here. Then here's a sample of the material. This is the existing siding. We're going to be matching it with the same color, which is here. And then all the trim is going to be like an AZAC, which is, you know, material of choice of today. Replaces wood, easy to maintain, doesn't need to be painted or anything like that. Windows are just going to be standard white to match. It's an Anderson window, and this is the look of it. It's a double hung window. Then I worked on just doing a color elevation. The existing garage is down here. This is where the addition is going to go, blending all the siding to match and the windows to match as well. Roof is also going to match, just as a point of reference. And then this is the side looking at 133 with all the windows. Pretty straightforward application. I don't know if there's any questions I can answer at this time.
Yeah, Lou, what are you doing for heating and cooling in there? Are you going to put ductless splits, or are you just going to use the existing heating in the house and run?
Yeah, we're going to connect to the existing system that's in the house. If it needs to be upgraded a little bit with another unit, it'll be in the attic of the existing house and then ducted into that space.
Nothing visible, nothing exterior-wise, everything will be internal.
No new condensers or anything like that. Nope.
Okay, and as far as that, it's going to be like an asphalt shingle that's just going to match like a gray color.
Yep, same color. Yeah, they had done this addition a couple years back, so we have all the materials listed, and we're going to follow the same type and shape and color.
What about gutters and leaders drawing water away from the new structure? What are you doing there?
Say that one again.
Gutters and leaders.
Yeah, gutters and leaders are going to match. There's no reason not to match those for sure.
Okay, so the questions. And it's going to go in the existing footprint that's already above the garage, right?
Correct. Yeah.
This is Seth Roy. Did you have any, I mean, that weird chamfer I know in the corner because of the zoning setback?
Correct.
Was there any discussion because the garage was already there, if that would be an easier variance to get just to square that off? It just seems unfortunate to have that.
It was a discussion, but the homeowners would like to get this done sooner than later for, you know, the holidays. So to go for the variance for an extra meeting and then come back to the Architecture Review Board just wasn't in the card. So we decided to go this route. And I did check with Joe, the building inspector, and he said we would need a variance to go on top of the existing structure because it's non-conforming. And if we go on top of it, increase the non-conformity, therefore we'd need a variance. So yeah, it was a discussion, but we decided to go this route just to get it done.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, Lou, this is Bobby Backer. Just one more question. It's just going to be a cedar shingle and you're just going to paint it? It's not going to be...
Cedar shingles on the existing house, and we're going to paint it that Patriot color. Like I said, we had the paint chip from the last project, and this is it right here. It's going to match.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Nice.
Yep.
This is Jeff. I don't have any questions.
I don't either. I'm familiar with the house and it looks fine to me.
Thank you.
I mean, anyone from the public that wants to speak on it, unless anyone else from the board wants to chime in?
Let me check.
Thank you.
Well, there are 4 people in the public, but none of them have raised their hand. So I'm assuming that there are no comments.
Okay. And Amanda, I think we're confident we could go forward and make a motion to approve for BAR tonight.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
Okay. So let's make a motion to approve for BAR.
Seth Roy, motion to approve.
Michael Aronson, second.
Okay. Roll call, Seth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
David Chow,
Aye.
Roberto Fernandez,
Aye.
Jeff Gasparo,
Aye.
and Eric Talbot.
Aye.
All right, that's 7 in favor, none against.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think those were the 2 items that were just on the agenda as far as continuing and new items. So I guess we can jump to additional business of the board for the wetlands.
Correct. We have approval of minutes, local law.
Yeah, usually the chair just approves the minutes. But if anybody has any changes, definitely let Jamie know.
I don't know. I'm good. I reviewed the minutes. That was fine.
Okay. I'm not wrong on that, Jamie. Usually Mike just signs the minutes. They don't take a vote on.
Oh, they don't? Okay, I apologize. Oh.
Yeah. Jamie, you're on mute.
No, I don't believe we do that anymore.
Yeah, okay. So if we want to move to wetlands law, unless anybody has any other comments on the minutes.
Nope.
Okay.
No comments, right? All right, so today we have Joe Tremelli with us, who Joe was, Keller Sessions was part of the team, along with Amanda, from our consultants that helped put together the wetlands ordinance. Joe's very familiar with wetlands ordinances in general. Keller Sessions actually administers wetlands in North Castle, where some of the legislation, the text from the legislation came from, and will most likely be administering the wetlands workforce and doing the reviews if the law is passed. So if you have any questions regarding the wetlands ordinance, please take this opportunity to ask Joe Tremelli. We would like to try to get these comments in by the end of the week. That is the stated goal from the Board of Trustees. So I'm sure all of you have had an opportunity to look at the legislation. So feel free to ask questions and provide comments.
Hey, Joe, this is Bobby Bowker. Is 100-foot setback standard a part of the course in this area, or is it usually less? Is it more? Like, where do we sit on the 100-foot setback area from the, I guess, the end of the wetlands, either direction?
It is a discretionary number, but 100 feet is very common in a number of municipalities throughout Westchester. That's typically what we find, not only in Lewisboro, one of the towns we consult for, their buffer is 150 feet. So,
less dense than the village of Ossining, all right?
Excuse me?
Lewisboro is a far less dense municipality than the village of we have a house, Walker Book out there, and houses are pretty spread out. I mean, in the village, you probably have where this 100-foot is, you're probably affecting 300 different residences here.
True. But it would only affect, you know, the whoever's the applicant is, right? So if you have a property you want to develop and you're required to get a wetland permit, obviously your adjoining properties aren't necessarily affected by that project. The wetland law will encompass more properties with a 100-foot buffer than something lesser, of course. But again, that's a discretionary number. It's discretionary, but it's very common. I seldom see anything less than that. There are some municipalities that have a lesser threshold, say 50 feet, but they regulate different activities, and they're probably more strict. You know, they'll lessen. They have a 100-foot buffer. They'll also have a 50, but in that 50, the regulations and the regulated activities are much more stringent. So I think you'll find that 100 feet is very common.
Okay.
It's also in keeping with the state's, the DEC's freshwater wetland law. They have a 100-foot adjacent area that they regulate.
Got it. Do we have, Mrs. Balcon, do we have an exact number of how many parcels are impacted by the 100-foot setback? Did we go through like all the parcels that could be impacted, I guess? Because obviously not all going to be impacted unless they file for anything.
Yeah, so I think to answer your question a couple of different ways. No, we do not have the full number. I did get the number when we did the regulated areas. Now, because we have a check zone, there are more that are affected by this. But more as a comment to the statement you just made. Whether it's affected or not, I think isn't necessarily that there will be changes to be made. So if it's in a check zone, it's going to be affected. It may not actually have any impacts on the project, but it will come at an additional cost for that review that you have to pay. So there's an impact, even though it's not necessarily an impact that would have, you know, an impact on the ability to develop anything on that site. Beyond that, we don't have that number. I can get you that number. I can email that to the group tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jaime.
So just to clarify, if a property's outside the check zone, there's no new regulation on that property. This law will not have any effect on someone proposing or seeking a permit for any kind of work outside the check zone.
So go ahead, Joe. I apologize.
I was going to say, the wetland map that's been established is the baseline, and we provided a check zone because the wetland mapping, you know, it's from available sources, whether it's Westchester County, the DEC, available aerial imagery. So it's not exact, right? So we proposed a check zone around that. And even with that check zone, there may be instances where a site-specific wetland exists and it's not known at the time of the mapping. So there is language in the code that provides the ability for the village to require a wetland permit for a parcel that may be outside of that check zone, but it's been determined for whatever reason that there's a wetland on the property. But for the most part, you're correct. If you're beyond the check zone, the likelihood of you requiring a wetland permit is small.
About here, and this isn't just for wetlands. This is for waterways and streams. It's not just for wetland structures. Wetlands are pretty specific, so this would be more broad-based, right?
Right. It's wetlands and water courses. There are two buffers, right? There's a 100-foot buffer proposed for wetlands and a 50-foot buffer proposed for water courses. So there is a distinction between the two in that sense.
Got it. So the check marks that we see on the PDF, that's 100-foot just for wetlands, or it does have the water course 50-foot buffer in there too?
So the map that you have shows a 50-foot buffer from water courses and a 100-foot buffer from wetlands. They're treated differently in the buffering. Yeah. And then there's an additional 100-foot check zone, I believe. Is it 50-foot or 100-foot check zone?
It's 100. So in theory, Bobby, you have a 200-foot regulated area potentially for a wetland and 150 feet potentially for a watercourse. You know, when you add the buffer, the check zone to the buffer.
Got it. Thanks, Joe.
Could you talk a little bit more about exactly what the role of the planning board would be with respect to a project that happens to be within one of these areas and coming before the board for other approvals?
Yeah, so there are two different types of wetlands applications. There's going to be the wetland applications that are administratively handled. That would go to the building department. The building department then would reach out to the wetlands consultant, Keller Sessions, ask them to review if there are any small changes that need to be made, or if there's any sort of additional that would essentially get handled in-house. For the larger projects, the planning board would get that normal kind of site plan review. If there was a wetland on site, then it would just be sort of like an additional note or notes on the engineer's report that you get from Keller Sessions now. So it would, essentially you'd have the ability to do a few different things, and I'll let Joe kind of clarify those various different aspects, but the recommendations and the review would be kind of handled by Keller Sessions, and this body would sort of weigh in on that stuff. So you want to talk a little bit about how that works functionally, Joe?
Sure. So like you said, an application that would trigger the need for a wetland permit by your board would typically be in front of you anyway for something else. So it's kind of the way we tried to craft this law so that it's not overly burdensome. So with that, when something like that is in front of you, your board would review it for potential wetland impacts, and they would there's a mitigation plan that would be required, one-to-one mitigation for wetland or wetland buffer disturbance, and your board would evaluate the impacts. There'd be an attempt to try and minimize those impacts, maybe some minor modifications to the plan or the layout. And when you get that plan to a point where you're comfortable, you would require appropriate mitigation. That would be evaluated by your board as well as your wetland consultant. And then that would all come together in an approved plan.
So in your opinion, do you think that's really cost prohibitive from someone that wants to submit a plan and go through the process? I have no idea what the potential cost of any of this could be. If it's
cost prohibitive in the sense of a processing an application?
Like the mitigation process, all these protection mechanisms that we put into place. I have no idea what that will entail. I don't think a lot of these people that are going to do projects are going to entail that. I'm going to lay that out for people that submit projects. Like they have to do.
Well, it will require that they retain a wetland consultant to evaluate the site and evaluate the quality of the wetland and then design an appropriate mitigation for it. So there is an added cost to an applicant dealing with a wetland application, sure.
So when the project is one of the smaller type of projects that the proposed law would allow the building department to issue the wetlands permit, they still have to provide a mitigation plan, but it's going to be reviewed just by the building inspector. It'll still have to meet the requirements of the law.
Hey, Jeff, what do we quantify as a smaller project? Is that something that's using the existing footage?
Yeah, there's some within the law. There's a proposed law. There are certain types of projects that are defined that are generally smaller kinds of projects that the building department is the approving entity.
So imagine somebody's putting in, give us a for instance, Joe, of what happens in North Castle with somebody who wants to put an in-ground pool in a regulated area, like a 10 feet by 20-foot pool.
They have a similar setup where we have an administrative level wetland permit where it's reviewed by our office and the building department staff. And then when a project rises to the level of planning board review, it then goes to, in addition to the planning board, it goes to the conservation board for their review and input. They're an advisory board to the planning board. So they have, two entities, two boards reviewing a wetland application. The simpler applications are, like I said, they're handled between the building department staff, our office. Sometimes they have a kind of a hybrid where if it's an administrative level permit, but there's still some concern as to what the appropriate mitigation would be. We do invite the conservation board to look at it and advise us and the building department. But a typical, if you had a pool and a patio in a wetland buffer, typical mitigation might be something along the lines of maybe a planted rain garden to both mitigate stormwater as well as provide some plantings. It could be invasive removals if you have say a wooded wetland buffer that's got a lot of vines and invasive species. They can remove that material as mitigation. There's a number of plantings that could be done. No mow zones, demarcated areas where we would let the land grow fallow and meadow, keeping in mind that the lots are larger. Typically, we're looking at 1 to 5 acre lots where you can carve off a piece of it and set up a boulder retaining wall or something, or some kind of demarcation, and let a half acre or whatever you need go into a meadow. But there's plenty of options, and you'll find that kind of the menu that you could pick from is fairly standard. Wetland consultants and wetland designers, we kind of all pick from the same palette. But that's typically what you find. It's some kind of additional plantings, enhancement of maybe a wetland area with supplemental plantings, removal of invasive species, cleaning up of debris, deadfall, vines, that nature. It's a somewhat, some of the mitigation is easily measurable. If you create a wetland area, you can quantify that space. But something like, invasive removal, cutting vines off of trees, it's kind of hard to quantify, but there's a balance and a kind of a meeting of the minds and an agreement to what's appropriate. I hope that answered the question.
I got what you were saying, Jeff.
It's not as simple as the mathematics of a sewer design, right? It's quantifiable, it's very exact, and it is what it is. Wetlands and wetland mitigation is a little bit of an art to it. So there is it's not as easily calculated, but like I said, there is basically a meeting of the minds of what's appropriate for the proposal.
On those smaller type projects that fall within, if people are interested, it's like construction of certain driveways, decks and patios, covered porches, sheds over a certain size. But so does that get referred to EAC, or basically that's all between the building inspector and the applicant and their wetlands consultant?
The only applications that would get referred to EAC are those in front of your board.
Right.
Okay.
So similar to what we do in North Castle, as I was explaining before, we have a conservation board. Here you would refer the plan to the EAC, and they would have an advisory role to your board as to what's an appropriate level of disturbance and mitigation.
Yeah, and we would look to flag those immediately. So as soon as the application comes in, if it's clear that they're in a wetland, we'd flag those right away and try to get out submissions to the EAC for review.
So procedurally, it would be like a zoning board. If a zoning variance was needed, we would need EAC to come back with recommendations before we're able to make a final decision.
I don't know if we covered that piece of it. I do know that planning board starts, then you have to refer it to zoning board and it comes back, and that's part of the code. I don't know that we have required that, but that is probably the most sensible path.
It says that the planning board shall refer the application to the EAC.
Okay.
And I think, what do they have? Is it 30 days or 31 days to respond?
Yeah, they have a limit of how, they have to turn it around with their recommendations within 30 days of the referral date.
So any project that came before us that fell into the wetlands area, sorry, would have to be automatically referred to the EAC?
Yeah.
And Amanda, the EAC will have final say if the project can move forward or not as constructed.
No.
No, I think they just have, they just provide recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah, they're advisory, so they're going to provide you with recommendations. You can take them for what they are. You could supplement them. You could reduce them if you if you so choose. But you do need their recommendation.
Right, they still, at this point, remain an advisory body within the village.
Got it. I'm looking at the map now. It seems like when you get down into the village, especially on Broadway, Independence, Brandit, that it looks like just about every house is going to be impacted by it. Unless I'm reading the map wrong, because there's no like street lines or street signs on there. I don't know. I guess I'm going to wait till we get the email from Jaime tomorrow to see how many properties could be impacted before I speak on that anymore, that component of it.
Well, if you think it's too broad of, a buffer, I would say,
Well, what if properties fall off if we reduce the buffer to 50 feet? Like how many less properties are impacted by that?
None, because I think all those Broadway ones are next to the Sing Sing Kill. It already is 50 feet.
I guess one of the questions is, are there any examples of laws where that buffer changes depending on the density of the district?
I don't know.
That I'm aware of.
It seems like in most of these areas where you have these 100-foot setbacks, they're in pretty laid out districts, like Oldwood, Lewisboro. Right on top of each other, every property.
I think you'll find that a lot of those smaller lots also, when their space is limited for development. So anything that they do will likely fall under the administrative category. It doesn't reduce the number of lots that are affected, but I don't think you'll see many of them rise to the level of a planning board action.
And then there are a lot of activities that are exempt as well.
Yeah, a lot of effort was made to ensure that if it didn't need a building permit, it did need a wetlands review. A significant amount of work went into try to ensure that we weren't creating paperwork where there was none. Because there was a concern that, you had applicants who wanted to do things in the backyard that have never needed to get a permit for those items before. And now all of a sudden they would need to get a permit for them. And so we were, a lot of care was taken to make sure that didn't happen. So essentially these people would have been coming either to get a building permit or they would have been coming in to get site plan approval. So that process can kind of be done in tandem with the normal process that they were going through.
Oh, that's good to know. So if someone had a tree fall through the roof, they wouldn't need to get a permit for that currently, so they wouldn't need to go in front of the EPC currently, because there's no building permit required for that. Got it. Okay.
I can't speak to the tree through the roof. I don't know. Actually.
I'm just thinking, we don't want to burden people that need a new roof. Currently, you don't need a permit in the village of Ossining to change a roof, and that's something you probably have to do right away. So
I would note that you don't need to get a wetlands permit for a new roof.
No.
Like that's not something that would be covered. So we did get some questions like, so you're saying if I'm changing my bathroom, I need a wetlands permit? No. It's only if you're doing something that's disturbing the ground.
Yeah.
Well, but you could, there's a shed that's under 144 square feet that has no electricity. Right now, you don't need a permit for something like that.
You don't need a wetland permit for it either.
That remains the case for the wetlands.
So theoretically, someone could put a 12 by 12 shed in the wetland check zone and not need a permit, and they wouldn't be violating this law.
Right.
Correct.
Decision.
It's also, I think it's also important to know that it would be extremely hard to catch people. Like, oh, you have a 13-foot shed. It would be very hard to enforce that.
Yeah, enforcement was also a big part of this.
But also anything existing that you're repairing, like I'm looking, you don't need a permit to repair existing walkways or walls, maintain existing landscaping, composting, mowing, trimming vegetation, normal gardening activities, even operation and maintenance of existing dams. So there's a lot that can happen without ever needing a permit, without ever implicating the law at all. And like we said with the shed example or fence example, something that you're doing that doesn't require a permit at all is permitted under this law. It won't violate the this wetlands ordinance.
Correct.
That's the intent.
Just one stupid question. I guess the river is not considered a water course because there's no buffer along the coast.
So this is a freshwater wetland. And so no, the Hudson River is not considered a freshwater wetland. Not for the purposes of this. It has its own regulations. To be honest, I mean, there's much more concern about sea level rise than there are about preserving wetlands right along the water's edge. So.
Well, we still have the LWRP, you know, that applies.
Yeah. I think it is also, that's actually a good point. Every property that's west of Route 9 already had to go to the EAC.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the wetlands that you see here, I mean, these are undeveloped properties in the CVD district. I think this is Crawbucky over here. You know, these are, you know, right here, you can see these are properties I think that were knowingly built around a wetland and they sort of like developed around them. Same with this property here, same with this large wetland here, and this large wetland over here. So the properties that are most impacted are these properties that are along the Kill, which is largely developed right now. But there are, you know, there are some, I think, different components to those properties that would certainly affect that. And even though there are some properties that are going to be somewhat affected, like the DPW site is close. I think we're looking at potentially adding some language in that talks about brownfield cleanups and various other things. So it's tough. I know that there have been concerns about the impact that this might have on the development community, whether or not it's now going to make property very difficult to develop. You know, the other side of that is that there's a real desire to preserve what remains of the wetlands that do exist in Ossining. If you look at, you know, Briarcliff or you look at Ossining Town, they have a lot of property that's within wetland buffers because of the development of the village in large part. There really aren't a lot of wetlands left because most of them have been built over. And so I think that the intent of the legislation is to strike a balance between still permitting, you know, development to take place, but preserving where it was possible to preserve those properties. So I mean, I think it would be really useful to have any, you know, tweaks or changes that you think, you know, we've overlooked. But overall, I think that if your concern is that it's going to prevent development or it's going to make it impossible for property owners to yield that, I would say that, you know, that might be true in some cases, but that's also somewhat speculative. There are a couple of projects that I've seen that are at various different stages of approval, but never went through. There's one property here, there's another property here. You know, those properties are going to encounter some new challenges if they try to develop the way that they did before, but that does not render those properties as sort of like a loss, right? You can do a lot with the zoning code to sort of merge properties together, allowing for the density to hit another side that would certainly, you know, allow development to continue to take place, but it just have to adapt to the new environmental concerns. And so I think that, you know, again, while you are working to preserve wetlands, it does not, in my opinion, yield like the end of all development. Most of these parcels that have these wetlands, with the exception of the ones that are along sort of the Sing Sing Kill and other water courses, most of them were pretty hard to develop already. they remain hard to develop. It's not just because of the wetlands, it's also because of other types of issues, environmental issues, which have prevented them from getting developed up to this point. So, you know, considering areas like the Sing Sing Kill and the impact that might have on adjacent properties were concerning, it was really important for us to try to come up with a strategy in developing the language that would accommodate the continued use and development of these properties, so that we didn't overburden existing property owners and taxpayers, but did come up with a smart, sensible solution.
I would generally agree with your assessment about development, and I'm just kind of curious for sort of maybe illustrative purposes that if the project that we recently reviewed, the Birchbrook Manor project, if this was subject to this sort of regulation, could we kind of speculate about what kind of impact that might have had on this project, or maybe it wouldn't have? But I'm just sort of curious, given.
Well, I want to be really careful about speculating too much about what kind of impact it may have had, because there is still the ability that in the future that it could have an impact on this property if you know, theoretically, you know, hasn't been built yet, so it's not like a completed project. But I would say that, you know, there are mitigation measures written into the plan. There, you know, the idea that there might have been, you know, a different layout of the property, or there might have been further mitigation measures that were taken to accommodate the property as it was developed, might have impacted it. I imagine it would have had some impact. I can't say the extent to which it would have impacted the site. And, you know, you may find that it'll have impacts in ways that you never thought, right? You may say like, oh, suddenly I have a property that I could only build a 3-story building, but I can get 40 units on it. Now I have a tiny little space where I can build, so I need to build a 6-story building in order to get my units on that site. And so you've accommodated one change by getting a variance because of the inability to build on the other side that is totally different than what you would have received. So it's hard to sort of connect, you know, from A to B. Oh, you can't build here, so nothing happens. It may just mean that what comes out of that in the wash is a little bit different than what you initially thought was going to happen.
I also just want to say that, you know, when the planning board reviewed Birchbrook in particular, Kellerton Sessions did do a review of the wetlands. And so it's not like that issue had not been addressed at all. It wasn't addressed in the context of a wetlands ordinance. So there were measures that were taken to address the on-site wetlands.
All right.
And so I did want to address, I was looking back at, you know, the notes that I have from July, and it seems like the only kind of outstanding issue that I can see that needs to be talked about is the planning board's role in enforcement, which is in proposed section 149-11, which I know Jeff had raised as a potential issue. And I don't know, Jeff, if that's something you still want to talk about, but it's something that Corp Counsel and my office had, during the drafting process, discussed as something that we needed to tweak further, but we decided to do it down the line. So after reviewing it further, we agreed that anything that could be subject to a fine or imprisonment should go to Justice Court for adjudication. But since Justice Court doesn't have the authority to issue injunctive relief, the planning board should still have the authority to direct the performance of or the cessation of any type of actions like restoration of wetlands or anything like that. So we will take a look at the language in this penalties section and adjust it accordingly. But I think that kind of gets at the heart of the concern you had raised in the last meeting.
Yeah, I'm just, I think there are, so it's written in an interesting way, but the planning board does have the authority to assess a fine, correct?
Well, the issue kind of relates to whether these fines are criminal or civil, which is a really sticky issue that I'd rather not go into right now. And, you know, the case that you brought to our attention and that AG opinion. They do raise the issue of like whether we're taking jurisdiction away from the courts, and we'd rather just not get into that and leave any sort of fines or imprisonment or penalties that relate to, you know, those sorts of issues, leave it to the justice court, and the planning board should have any sort of jurisdiction over enjoining activities or injunctive relief or anything like that, since that's kind of the way things break down naturally anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that makes natural sense about if you want to direct the property owner to restore the property, it makes a lot of sense to have that done through the planning process and have the expertise of, you know, have that in front of the board and have the board making decisions about how that's supposed to take place. So I don't know, maybe I'll look at it some more, and if I can write to you or Stuart if I have any more thoughts about that. But
yeah, if you want to write about it, write to both of us, because we've been talking about it, and it'd be helpful for both of us to see any other thoughts you have.
Okay.
But I'll be making some edits to that section for the Board of Trustees to look at, because we had agreed, you know, a while ago that it needed work, and, you know, now's the time to make those changes. So, in terms of comments,
Raised his hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Eric Talbot, you raised your hand?
oh,
Nice.
You gotta unmute. No, can't hear you. No, can't hear you. Never mind, I guess. All right.
in terms of comments to the Board of Trustees, do we have anything that, you know, we want to put together? I mean, seems like
We have to have
really
all.
good discussion.
Like, can we email like you and Jaime? Like, when do you want everything in by, so we can submit it to the BOT?
The next couple of days would be good, because then I want to make sure, you know, you guys can see a draft.
You think get it in by Friday?
Yeah, I would say get the comments in by the end of Thursday if you could.
Yeah.
Ben has to get them in. We have to look at them together on Friday, and then I think you have to get them in by Monday, Amanda, right?
I have to have them to Stuart by Monday.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a hard deadline.
Right, so Friday morning, you're on it. Thursday night. Got it.
Yes, please. But I think this was a really good discussion.
I mean, it's a fine line we have to tread here, because you want to protect our wetlands, but you don't want to make the process overly burdensome, not just to developers, but to property owners. Ossining has a very old house in stock. A lot of these properties are really old. And when they change hands, the new owners are going to want to renovate and rehab these properties. They're not developers. They're people that want to live in Ossining. And if we make that process overly burdensome to them, I don't know what the economic impact is going to be. We don't know what it's going to be, but we got to tread a fine line there. You can't make it overly burdensome to individual property owners too.
Yeah, I mean, I would note, you know, that property that came forward today, he wouldn't have been affected by this, right? They're just building on top of their existing footprint. So there are a lot of, anybody who wants to do any work on the inside of the building is going to be fine. Anybody who wants to do any work going up should be fine. Even I think small additions are covered under the administrative variance, under the administrative task, right? So it's not going to be something that would be super impossible.
Get it done. I just would love to like envision the process start to finish for someone, like different scenarios, you know, like what it would look like in the real world. That'd be a good thing to like envision, like see what it will actually look like.
Okay. All right. I mean, I can't come back to you. Would you like to do that now? Would you like to like just go through the process now?
Just, I think that's something that'll be good for all of us to like have, you know, like the process, like a framework of what it'll look like.
Okay, so maybe I can put together like a flow chart.
Yeah.
All right. So let me do that. Let me put together a flow chart of what that process is. I guess I would ask Joe, would it be okay for us to have a chat in the morning?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
quickly get that together? 'Cause I think that's a good question. I mean, I think it is a concern. So what's the process? How's it work? So I can do that.
I could totally be overthinking it and blowing it out of proportion, or not.
I think you got to overthink it right at the beginning because it hasn't been passed yet, and it's better to overthink it now than underthink it.
Yep.
So I don't think that's a bad thing.
I would suggest maybe 3 different scenarios, like the no permit exempt scenario, the administrative permit scenario, and the planning board scenario. Maybe a few different, like examples of what falls into each. I mean, obviously we know maybe the law kind of already is pretty obvious in terms of what's exempt, but maybe just put it into context of like, property owners doing blah, blah, blah type of project that isn't necessarily so obvious in the law. That would actually be exempt. And then a flow chart for the other 2 scenarios could be helpful.
Yep. Just give me that again. Can you give me that list? Because I was writing notes. So what were the 3 scenarios you said?
Maybe just describe a couple of scenarios that aren't super obvious in terms of what would be like exempt projects, not that are specifically stated in the law, but that would be typical projects that would not come within the scope of the law, and then a flow chart for the administrative permit process and a flow chart for the planning board process.
Okay.
Like examples of who could fall into each lane.
Okay, I will endeavor to get this to everybody by the end of tomorrow. So you have it in hand. You can take a look at it before you have to finalize comments on Thursday. Friday morning.
Thank you.
Nope. No.
Thursday night. Thursday night. Yeah, sorry.
Don't say the later date because then it'll be way later than that.
Yeah. Amanda says she's tired of working on weekends, y'all. So we get that. And I'll be off on Friday, so.
Mm-hmm.
First day off of the year. Well, I was sick a couple times. So.
Yeah, we all need a day off here or there.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Joe, our wetlands expert?
No, not yet. Thank you.
Nope.
Well, is that the last item on the agenda?
That is. So we may need a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn.
Seth Roy, second.
And you don't have to do a roll call for that. Say aye.
Have a great night, everyone. And we'll get
This is a record time, y'all. 8 o'clock.
Have a good week.
Yeah.
Take it
Take
easy.
care, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.